In the year 1324, a man walked across the Sahara Desert carrying so much wealth that he accidentally changed the value of money itself. Not through war, not through conquest, not through some carefully designed economic strategy. He did it simply by being generous. His name was Mansa Musa, and if history is to be believed, he may have been the richest human being who ever lived. Richer than modern billionaires, richer than oil kings, richer than tech founders, perhaps richer than every billionaire alive today combined. But this is not a story about wealth, at least not in the way most people think, because hidden inside the story of Mansa Musa is something far more important than gold, a lesson about value, a lesson about power, and a lesson about human psychology that is just as true today as it was 700 years ago. Because by the end of this story, you may start looking at money, success, status, and even your own life very differently. The world tells us that value is objective. A dollar is worth a dollar. Gold is worth gold. A degree is valuable. A prestigious job is valuable. A famous brand is valuable. We grow up believing these things are facts. But what if they are not? What if value is not something that exists inside an object? What if value exists somewhere else entirely? To understand that, we have to travel back to a time when one man possessed more wealth than the world knew how to comprehend. The Mali Empire sat in West Africa. Today, many people know little about it. But in the 14th century, Mali was one of the most powerful civilizations on Earth. Its trade routes stretched across vast distances. Its cities attracted merchants from across continents. Its influence reached far beyond its borders. And beneath its soil lay something the entire world desperately wanted: gold. Huge quantities of gold. At a time when kingdoms fought over precious metals, Mali possessed them in abundance. Historians estimate that nearly half of the world's known gold supply flowed through territories controlled by the empire. Think about that for a moment. Imagine if a single nation today controlled half of the world's oil, half of the world's semiconductors, half of the world's artificial intelligence infrastructure. The balance of power would shift instantly. That was the position Mali occupied. And at the center of it all stood Mansa Musa. When he became ruler in 1312, he inherited one of the wealthiest empires on earth. But unlike many rulers throughout history, he was not remembered primarily for military conquest. He became famous for something much stranger: the way he displayed wealth, the way he moved through the world, and most importantly, the way he unintentionally revealed how fragile value really is. In 1324, Mansa Musa decided to undertake the Hajj, the sacred pilgrimage to Mecca. For Muslim rulers, this journey was considered an important religious duty. Many rulers completed it. Few were remembered for it. Mansa Musa would be different, very different. As preparations began, word spread across the empire. A massive caravan was forming. Thousands of people joined the journey. Soldiers, servants, officials, scholars, merchants. Camels loaded with supplies crossed the desert. Gold traveled with them, lots of it. Historical accounts disagree on exact numbers. Some describe thousands of attendants. Others describe tens of thousands. But every account agrees on one thing: the scale was almost unimaginable. Villages watched in disbelief as the caravan passed. Cities heard rumors weeks before its arrival. People who had never seen such wealth suddenly found themselves standing beside it. And wherever Mansa Musa went, he gave. He gave to the poor. He gave to religious leaders. He gave to scholars. He gave to rulers. He gave to strangers. Gold flowed from his hands as if it would never run out. To the people receiving it, this seemed like a blessing, a miracle, an act of extraordinary generosity. And for a while it was. But there was a problem nobody understood yet, because wealth does not exist in isolation. Every economy is built on perception. Every market is built on belief. And every currency depends on scarcity. The more rare something is, the more valuable it appears. The more common it becomes, the less special it feels. This principle had governed human civilization for thousands of years, but very few people had ever witnessed it unfold on such a massive scale. Then Mansa Musa reached Cairo, one of the most important cities in the world, a center of commerce, a center of trade, a center of power. And there the consequences began. Gold flooded the city. Merchants received it, officials received it, religious institutions received it, ordinary people received it. Suddenly there was more gold moving through the economy than anyone expected. And as supply increased, value decreased. The market reacted. Prices shifted. Purchasing power changed. The economy adjusted itself around the new reality. According to historical accounts, the effects lingered for more than a decade. Pause for a moment and consider how extraordinary that is. One man's generosity altered an entire regional economy. Not because he destroyed anything, not because he stole anything, not because he forced anyone to do anything, simply because he changed the perception of scarcity. And that raises a fascinating question. If gold can lose value because there is too much of it, what was giving it value in the first place? Most people never ask that question. They assume value is inherent, that it exists naturally inside valuable things. But does it? Gold cannot feed you. Gold cannot cure disease. Gold cannot build shelter on its own. Its value comes from something else. Collective belief. People believe gold is valuable, therefore it becomes valuable. The agreement creates the value. And once you understand this, an uncomfortable truth begins to emerge. The same principle applies almost everywhere. Money works because people believe it works. Brands work because people believe they matter. Status works because people agree it matters. Entire industries operate on shared assumptions. Entire economies rest upon collective belief. And collective belief can change, sometimes slowly, sometimes overnight. That is what Mansa Musa accidentally demonstrated. He showed that value is not fixed. Value is psychological. The object remained unchanged. The belief changed. And belief was what mattered all along. But the story does not end there, because Mansa Musa's greatest impact was not economic, it was informational. After completing his pilgrimage, he returned home with scholars, architects, scientists, and thinkers. He invested heavily in education. He invested in learning. He invested in knowledge. Cities such as Timbuktu flourished. Libraries expanded. Universities grew. Manuscripts were copied and preserved. Students traveled from distant lands to study there. For centuries, Timbuktu became one of the intellectual centers of the world. Yet ask many people today about Timbuktu. They picture somewhere remote, somewhere forgotten, somewhere insignificant. How did that happen? How does one of the world's great centers of knowledge become a punchline for remoteness? Again, the answer is perception. The answer is narrative. The answer is collective belief. Because human beings very rarely see reality directly. Instead, we see stories. We see mental maps. We see simplified versions of the world created inside our minds. And those maps can be rewritten. Before Mansa Musa's pilgrimage, much of Europe barely understood the scale of West African wealth. Afterward, everything changed. Stories spread, maps were redrawn, rumors traveled across continents. Suddenly, Mali was no longer invisible. The world was forced to update its understanding of where wealth existed, where power existed, where knowledge existed. One ruler had changed the global conversation, not through military conquest, not through invasion, but through visibility, through information, through attention. And that lesson may be more relevant today than ever before. Because in the modern world, attention creates value. Visibility creates opportunity. Perception shapes reality. A company can become worth billions because investors believe in its future. A technology can explode in popularity because enough people think it matters. A brand can sell ordinary products at extraordinary prices because people believe the story attached to them. Again and again, history repeats the same pattern. The story changes. The psychology remains the same. Now think about your own life. Think about the things you chase, the things you fear losing, the things society tells you are important. A degree, a job title, a salary number, a luxury brand, a social status. How much of their value is inherent, and how much of it exists because millions of strangers collectively agree it exists? That question can be uncomfortable, because it forces us to examine assumptions we rarely challenge. Yet it is also incredibly powerful, because once you understand the psychology of value, you begin to recognize opportunities others miss. You begin to see how entire industries rise and fall. You begin to understand why fortunes are created, why reputations change, why trends emerge, why old certainties disappear, and why today's obvious truth can become tomorrow's forgotten belief. The final chapter of Mansa Musa's story makes this lesson even more profound. Within roughly a century after his reign, the Mali Empire began to decline. Trade routes shifted, political power changed hands, new empires emerged. Gradually, the civilization that once amazed the world faded from global attention. Its wealth became history, its influence became memory, its reputation diminished. Yet the facts remained. The empire had existed, the gold had existed, the knowledge had existed. What changed was not reality. What changed was perception. The world's attention moved elsewhere, and with it, the story changed. That is why Mansa Musa's story matters. Not because he was rich, not because he carried gold across a desert, not because he altered an economy, but because his life reveals a deeper truth. Value it is not merely some man we discover. Often, value is something we collectively create. And once enough people believe something different, the value changes. 700 years later, the lesson remains the same. The things we value most may not be as permanent as they appear. The systems we trust may not be as fixed as we imagine. And the beliefs shaping our lives may be far more powerful than the objects themselves. Mansa Musa never set out to teach the world this lesson. Yet by simply living as one of history's wealthiest rulers, he accidentally exposed one of the most important truths about human civilization. The world runs on belief, and belief, more than gold, has always been the most valuable resource of all. If this story changed the way you think about value, wait until you see what history teaches about power. Subscribe to Throne of Mind, and I'll see you in the next lesson.